Hello and welcome back to another episode of Over My Dead Pod. I'm Kylie Caldwell
This is Kate Carter. And I'm Holly Spear.
and I have a juicy case for you guys today. So, the
Ooh.
murder of Mike Williams has it all: a suspicious disappearance, life insurance policies, affairs, and even alligators. It may be a little special appearance, but you'll hear about that later. So, let's get into it. Is this on your list, Holly? You made a face.
No, special appearance. I was like, what is that?
By an alligator?
That would have been better.
That was a real question. I thought that's what that meant, so never mind. You were like alligator, special appearance.
A famous alligator. You
Yeah,
guys all know about him.
just gonna tap dance, Yeah.
Yeah. Jerry Michael Williams grew up in Bradfordville, Florida, which is a little north of Tallahassee. He went by his middle name Michael, but more commonly Mike, so that's the name I'll be using. Mike's upbringing was pretty normal. His dad was a bus driver and his mom ran an in home daycare center. They lived modestly in a trailer home and saved up every penny in order to send their two sons to a private Christian school. Mike and his brother Nick also helped out by working after school at a local grocery store. Mike excelled in school. He got good grades, he played football, and was even elected student council president. In high school, he met his future wife, Denise Merrill. So I'm not exactly sure when they began dating. I think it was after high school during college, but not entirely sure. So after high school graduation, Mike went on to Florida State and double majored in political science and urban planning. By 94, Mike had it all. Him and Denise got married, and he got a nice job as a property appraiser, bringing in a pretty large salary. The couple was able to buy a nice house in an upscale neighborhood outside of Tallahassee. Then they welcomed their only child, a daughter, in 99. So things are going great until about 2000 when Mike's dad died suddenly. Mike took this pretty hard, but he started to think about his own family and their future. After discussing things, he and Denise bought $1 million life insurance policy on him from their mutual friend, Brian Winchester. Mike thought that if anything happened to him, he would want his wife and daughter to be okay.
So taking out $1 million life insurance policy is nutso. The amount of payments that would come out of your paycheck to have that is probably hundreds, if not thousands of dollars.
Read somewhere he was making over $200,000 at his job,
Okay.
which in the late 90s, early 2000s is a pretty good chunk of change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he had inheritance from his dad. So I think they were doing pretty well.
Okay.
It's like that's
That's
a lot.
He did tell his mom, Cheryl, that he was thinking about borrowing money from the policy in order to take the rest of the year off, kind of going like a little sabbatical just to grieve and spend more time with his family. Him and Denise also told Cheryl and his brother Nick that they may start trying for a second child and spend their year traveling. But 2 days after this conversation, Mike went missing. Around noon on December 16th, 2000, Denise called her dad to tell him Mike hadn't returned home from duck hunting, and she was worried. She said Mike had woken up very early and went out to Lake Seminole, which is right on the border of Georgia. He would usually be back by now if you know duck hunting is an early morning thing, and the couple had plans to celebrate their 6th wedding anniversary that night. Denise's dad, Warren, went out to the lake with the couple's friend, Brian Winchester, to look around. They found Mike's 94 Ford Bronco parked at a remote boat launch, but no sign of the boat or Mike. Around 3 p.m., Warren reported Mike as missing. So I'm not sure if he called the police or if the police redirected the phone to somebody else, but it turns out the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission were the ones that were in charge of the search, since Mike was technically a missing hunter. The local sheriff's office did eventually come out to help in the search. The search began 10 minutes after the call and spread out from the point of the truck over 10 acres. People searched on foot, on boats with underwater cameras, and even by helicopter. But as the team ventured out, a big storm blew in, and the search had to be called off. So around 2:30 a.m. the next day, the search resumed and Mike's boat was found. Some reports said it was found by a helicopter, and others say it was Brian and his dad, so I'm not entirely sure. But the boat was only 225 feet away from the boat ramp. So either no one saw it during the storm, or it drifted there at some point when the search stopped. The engine was still on and Mike's shotgun was inside, but no other signs of Mike or his clothing. The Fish and Wildlife Commission kept searching though, but nothing else came up. They found a camo hat, but this couldn't be linked to Mike, so I think they just kind of discarded it. With no signs of foul play and no signs of Mike, the commission figured he drowned. So the lake used to be an orchard, and when they dammed it, they just kind of drowned all the trees. It happens all the time on this lake, apparently. Boats will just hit a tree, or stumps and logs will come up. They hit a tree, people fall out into the water. If they're wearing waders, they pretty much drown instantly because the waders will fill with water.
That seems dangerous.
It is. And I guess it's such a common occurrence that they're like, all right, it happened again.
Yeah.
The commission told the family that his body would likely float up in a few days. But spoiler alert, it never did. By January 3rd of 2001, the search pretty much stopped. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office only sent one officer a day to look around in case they were washed up. And then by February 11th, the search was officially called off. Without a body, the conclusion was that an alligator must have eaten Mike. The lake, like every body of water in Florida, is full of them, and Lake Seminole is estimated to have about 300. When I was Googling, I found a couple years ago, these fishermen caught a 700-pound alligator on Lake Seminole.
Absolutely not. Nope. No, thank you. Don't want any part of it.
That's insane. How often does that happen and that a person is eaten by alligators?
I don't think it's that often.
Well, I mean, it's depending on the area. I mean, if you're in swamp country, you know, okay, like what I think of at least is if you're in somewhere that there are alligators and you die. Okay, wait, I'm going to say this. I think he died and then could have been eaten by.
Yeah,
that would make more sense. Now, being attacked and eaten by an alligator, they usually don't ingest the whole body, I think. Right?
So what are they thinking at this time? Are they thinking that something happened to him and then they can't find his body because of the alligators, or are they saying that like he got attacked?
So they're thinking he drowned, his body was eaten after the fact, and the lake has these like hydrilla beds. They're like the long like vines and grass on the bottom, and it's apparently you can easily get caught up in them. So they think the remainder of his body is stuck in the hydrilla beds.
Gotcha. And I imagine that it's probably really hard to drag that body of water for a body if there's actual trees and 300 alligators and all kinds of stuff in there.
No, when I was like, why didn't they send out divers? And then I found out how many alligators. I was like, oh, that's why.
Yeah.
Up until this point, Mike's family still held out hope that he would be found in some capacity. It wasn't until the search was officially called off did Denise hold a memorial service the following day. A few months later in June, a fisherman found a pair of waders floating in the lake. The search was renewed and divers scoured the lake floor in that area. They ended up finding Mike's hunting jacket and a flashlight. In that jacket was Mike's hunting license. With this, Denise was able to go to the court and have Mike declared legally dead. And with that, she was able to cash between $1.5 and $2 million from his various life insurance policies.
I mean, I will say, playing devil's advocate, if your spouse dies and you're able to figure out life insurance, I mean, that's a lot of money, but it will help in the long run, you know, like you're not going to cash it out.
Well, and in the short run too, I know that when the investigations are ongoing for stuff like that, until a person's declared legally dead, you're not really going to be able to touch much money. And so
I don't think you get any of it, right?
I'm sure yeah. I mean, just like even his own like personal money. And so like funeral expenses, stuff like that, I'm sure you'd need it.
So I keep thinking, I was like, when is a reasonable amount of time to wait until you cash it? Like if you're not down bad on finances, and you have $2 million there, like, do you wait a bit?
Well, if you didn't kill your husband, I think it's okay for you not to wait.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you killed your husband, you should probably wait.
Yeah. Any cashing of life insurance policies is suspicious on.
Doesn't the insurance company usually do like a kind of a case of their own? Like to...
Yeah, I feel like I've heard of that.
Make sure it's collected correctly, you know, and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think so. I think they need a bunch of paperwork at minimum.
Yeah.
So everyone went back to their normal lives for the most part, believing Mike drowned and his body was eaten by alligators. But Cheryl, Mike's mom, never thought that this was the case. She hired a PI team to continue searching and investigate, but they came to the same conclusion as the officials: alligators. And here we have a red flag, a little hint. Denise told Cheryl that if her PI team kept poking around, Cheryl would no longer be able to see her granddaughter.
What is that, a threat?
Sounds like
Sounds
one.
like it to me.
So this didn't deter Cheryl, and she continued to take out ads in the newspapers, rent out billboards in town. She stood on street corners with pickets, asking for people to help out. She
Aw.
even lobbied the state to investigate. By 2004, her efforts paid off. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement agreed to reopen the case. And mind you, this is like the first time homicide detectives are involved. Before the Fish and Wildlife Commission were the ones heading the investigation. No offense to them, but it's not their forte. Now that the big boys were in charge, everything that we thought happened was debunked. The first thing the department noted was that the boat launch Mike used that day was odd. It was an unkempt mud patch, and there were concrete launches close by, which Mike had always used before, according to friends. Another thing friends report is that Mike rarely or never hunted alone. He was very on top of hunter safety. He wouldn't even put on his waders until he was literally about to get out of the boat onto shore. The department also looked further into his boat. They determined that the storm would have pushed the boat to the Georgia side of the lake, not a few hundred feet away from the ramp on the Florida site. Some reports said the boat's engine was still on when it was located. Others say it was off, but either way, it was still weird because the gas tank was full. If Mike fell out of the boat, the engine would be on and running and definitely would have run out of gas before it was found. And if the engine was off, he didn't hit a stump and fall out on impact.
When you first said those things, like when they found the boat, you said how it was pretty close to the boat ramp, but also that the engine was still running. In the back of my head, I was thinking, I was like, well, that's really weird because wouldn't the boat have run out of gas by now?
You would think.
You would think.
So the department also thought something was up, and they looked into this alligator theory to see if it was even possible. They called in alligator experts, which aren't their official name, but I think that's way cooler. And they said there was basically a 0% chance of that happening. So alligators don't feed in colder weather, and they basically go into like a hibernation like phase. On the day Mike went out to the lake, the water was basically freezing and even had ice near the shoreline. The high of that day was 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was 19 at night. One of the alligator experts said that even if there was one weird alligator eating a grown man at that time, there would be remains. Mike was 5'10" and 170 pounds, a bit too big for an alligator's stomach. The nail in the coffin for the alligator theory came from Mike's items that were found: the waders, jacket, and flashlight. None of these items had teeth marks, rips, anything. They were all in good condition, and the flashlight still worked. But in such good condition, it seemed like they hadn't been in water the entire time Mike was missing. This is a murder podcast. We know what happened, but the Florida Department of Law Enforcement didn't have enough evidence to point in one way or another. The investigation was difficult with so little, and also because of the fact that the lake wasn't treated as a crime scene during the initial search. There are many people searching for Mike that day, pros and volunteers tampering with the scene. The department did one final search of the lake in August of 2007, and with nothing new, they closed it once again. In the final report, they came to the conclusion that Mike did not die on Lake Seminole that day, but there's no evidence to point them anywhere else. In October of the same year, something did pop up. Mike's brother Nick found a photo of Mike and all of his guns. In the photo was a .22 Ruger pistol that Mike had inherited after their dad's passing. After Mike was declared legally dead, Denise gave all of the guns back to his family, all except that one in particular. So, Nick called the police, and ATF went to interview Denise about it. They knocked on the door, and guess who answered? Brian Winchester, Mike's best friend, and the man who sold him the insurance policy.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Well, there you go.
Case closed.
So it turns out Denise and Brian had gotten married in 2005. The new couple were interviewed by ATF, and a few days later, their attorney delivered the gun to authorities for testing. The reports from the interview and forensic testing of the gun have never been made public. I mean, spoiler alert, there is a trial later. It didn't even come up at trial, so I'm assuming they didn't find anything. In December of 2007, Denise and Brian made their only public statement about Mike's disappearance. Brian emailed the local paper and said, quote, "For 7 years, we have prayed and hoped to find out with certainty what happened to Mike. Nobody wants Mike found more than we do." End quote. Once people found out that Denise and Brian had gotten married, red flags were up and rumors began to circulate. With law enforcement hitting a dead end, another team took over. The Florida Department of Financial Services insurance fraud team began to investigate. If they could find any evidence that the insurance policies were obtained fraudulently, like if Denise took them out without Mike's knowledge, or if they were taken out solely for the purposes of killing Mike and getting the money, this could be the new angle. So in Florida, the statute of limitations for insurance fraud is 5 years. It's now been 8, but Florida allows for 3-year extensions in cases with extenuating circumstances. So this one fit in right in at the last minute. The team was granted warrants to investigate on the basis that Mike's body hadn't been found and Denise cashing the checks may be fraudulent. In the investigation, they realized that in her petition to court to declare Mike legally dead, the only policies brought up and cashed were the ones that Brian had sold them. So Mike had other life insurance policies like through work and stuff. She never even attempted to cash those.
Why would she not do that?
Do we know if like his were fraudulent, like in a way? You know, like they tried to cash his because they like something was illegal about it. Well, I mean, you know, other than the fact they probably killed him, but
I don't know why she didn't do all of them. I guess the ones Brian sold were easier to cash, but there was no evidence that anything was fraudulent about the policies themselves. Without them proving that Denise killed Mike, there was no evidence of fraud. So the case was closed once again. In 2008, investigators searched an area by a different boat launched with cadaver dogs. What prompted this search was a psychic. And, of course, nothing was found.
Gotta love a psychic.
I am waiting for the day that we get a psychic tip that, like, pans out.
I'm sure there's been one before, but it's probably just a coincidence. Don't come for me.
So everyone basically gave up, but Cheryl kept lobbying for someone to investigate and to reach a conclusion. Every single day, Cheryl wrote a letter to then Governor Rick Scott asking him to open an investigation. After over 200 letters without a response or even a notification that they had been received, Cheryl looked into it. Turns out, every single letter she wrote was directly forwarded to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, unopened, and then the department put them in the case box, also unopened. Pretty much for 16 years, nothing happens, but buckle up, guys. This is where the drama starts. On August 5th, 2016, Denise was driving to work and talking on the phone with her sister when suddenly a man jumped up from the back seat and put a gun to her head.
What? Okay.
Did not see this coming.
That's random.
This guy was her husband, Brian Winchester.
Shut
up.
What?
Wait. Okay. Explain yourself, Kylie.
So it turns out Denise and Brian separated a year prior. I read one report that said Brian had a sex and porn addiction, so that was the reason. Brian took Denise's phone and began shouting out directions for her to drive to. Instead, Denise pulled into a CVS parking lot right up to the door. She was like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And Brian promised he wasn't going to kill her. He just had a gun to her head, but he was going to kill himself instead. Denise was able to talk him out of it and drove him back to his truck, which was parked near her house. And get this. Brian gets out of the car, and before he gets back in his truck, he's like, "Hold on, I gotta grab something out of your car." In the trunk, he had put in ahead of time 2 plastic sheets, a spray bottle full of bleach, and some sort of metal tool.
Oh, so he's gonna kill her.
Well,
he said he wasn't, though.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind.
So Denise was keeping it cool, and she told him, like, "You just go on your way, I'll go on mine. Let's forget this ever happened. I won't tell the police. And Brian was like, okay, yeah, makes total sense. Denise drove straight to the police station, as one would.
Right.
She ended up being interviewed for over 3 hours about the ordeal, and police used the opportunity to ask her about Mike's disappearance. Denise continued to deny any involvement, which I think is kind of funny of the police. They're like, okay, you almost got murdered today by your estranged husband, but also, what about the one before that?
Yeah, aw, poor you.
But when Brian was arrested and brought in, he gave some hints. He said because Denise filed for divorce and blocked his number, he was worried she was going to tell the police about, quote, this guy who died 10 or 12 or 15 years ago, end quote. Brian ended up being charged with kidnapping, domestic assault, and armed burglary. He was not granted bail. He also worked out a plea agreement to avoid attempted murder charges and a possible life sentence. Denise did testify at Brian's sentencing and asked for a life sentence, saying she feared for her life, and the day he gets out, her life is over. Brian was ultimately sentenced to 20 years in prison, followed by 15 years of probation. To hold up his end of the deal, he had to work with investigators to find Mike. The day after Brian's sentencing, in December of 2017, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement announced that they had found Mike's body back in October.
What?
So while Brian was being held, he's already been convicted, like he did the plea agreement for the whole Denise debacle. He was working with investigators and told them where to find his body, and they waited until his sentencing was confirmed in order to announce it. So Mike's body was found buried on a dead-end road in Leon County, only 5 miles away from his childhood home. It took a bit of time, but DNA later came back as a match to his mother, Cheryl. The whole uncovering of Mike's body was a top-secret mission. Lower-level police and county works employees were told that the dig was a training exercise. So they dug and dug for 5 days straight, sometimes up to 16 hours a day. Once the area had been pretty much all dug up, cadaver dogs were brought in to inspect the dirt piles and got a hit. 98% of Mike's bones and all of his clothing was recovered with him. Right away, police confirmed that Mike was a victim of homicide, having been shot in the head.
Before, when did they find his body in conjunction with when she got charged?
So, after Brian got arrested for kidnapping Denise, he was in jail waiting sentencing because he pled guilty. So it didn't take too long. He told them where the body was in October. They found it a couple days later, and then they didn't announce it until he was sentenced in December.
Okay.
Yep.
That is really interesting, though, that they told all the people that it was a exercise.
They wanted to arrest somebody else, so everything had to be a top secret mission.
Yeah.
So this was also quite dramatic. On May 8th, 2018, just minutes after a grand jury indicted Denise, police swooped in and arrested her as she was leaving work for her daughter's 19th birthday. So the police were literally just hanging out in her work parking lot all day, waiting on the phone call, and they grabbed her before she could run. At the exact same time, a team of officers went to Mike's mom, Cheryl's house to inform her of the arrest. Denise ended up being charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and accessory after the fact. Through her attorney, she pled not guilty, putting all of the blame on Brian. By June of 2018, Denise was officially held without bond after a hearing in which one of Brian's interviews was played. In the recording, Brian confessed to shooting, killing, and burying Mike, but said it was all Denise's idea. The trial began only a few months later in December, and get this, Brian was granted complete immunity from his involvement in Mike's murder in exchange for testifying against Denise. In his testimony, Brian started off by saying that he and Denise dated in high school, but no surprise here, they never really stopped. He said their affair really took off in 1997 at a Sister Hazel concert, where they both went with their spouses on a double date.
Oh, so they were pretty much on a date with each other, and their spouses didn't know it.
Apparently this was a regular thing, like the couples were really good friends.
I bet they were.
Brian's first wife, Kathy, even testified about the affair, saying she first suspected it in 1999. Back then, Brian said he was going on a hunting trip to Alabama, but Kathy got a call from police that his car was found abandoned near Denise's house. Kathy also found movie tickets and a receipt for a locket with Denise's initials on it in Brian's pocket while doing laundry. The biggest surprise from Kathy's testimony was that for quite some time, she had been working with police. Kathy's phone calls with the two were being recorded, so they still had contact because Brian and Kathy have children together. But in these calls, Kathy would keep bringing up Mike. Both of them would change the subject. But one day, Denise got suspicious and she was like, okay, Kathy, like, what do you know? You know something. Kathy was like, well, I know what happened, and I wonder if I told Mike about the affair, if he would still be alive today. And Denise hung up.
This is getting so juicy. It's almost like the ex-wife is getting a little bit of revenge for being cheated on.
And I love her for it.
Yeah, she's doing good.
Yeah.
Back to Brian's testimony, because there's a lot. He said the thought of killing Mike came up from Denise because she said her family frowned upon divorce, which,
oh gosh, give me a break.
Oldest excuse in the book.
Yeah.
Also, by now, she's divorced from Brian. Brian had this idea of a hunting accident, but Denise wanted to throw both Mike and Kathy off of a boat in the Gulf of Mexico. Brian vetoed this, and he's like, why is Kathy involved? Like, why are we killing my wife too? And he also didn't want the mother of his children to die, which good for him. So then Denise was like, okay, well, let's stage a botched robbery at Mike's office. And they figured that would be too hard, too many witnesses, so they agreed on a boating accident. Brian did go through everything that happened the day of the murder. He said he invited Mike out duck hunting on the lake pretty early that morning. As soon as Mike put his waders on, Brian pushed him out of the boat, hoping he would drown, just like the police's original theory. But instead, Mike was able to swim to one of those tree stumps and hold on. Imagine there was some sort of conversation or screaming, but Brian ended up shooting Mike once in the face. He managed to put the body back into the boat and into his truck, stopping along the way to the burial site to buy a shovel and weights at Walmart.
That's just terrible. Like, he knew he was about to die and he's holding on, swimming around, like.
Fell out of the boat. I mean, probably was pushed from behind.
Yeah.
Didn't know that his best friend just pushed him out to try and murder him. And then probably calling for help. Yeah.
So you see what's going on. That's so terrible.
After burying his best friend, Brian cleaned out his truck and then went to a family Christmas party as if nothing had happened. Brian said after the murder, he and Denise decided to lay low to not raise any suspicion. They even pretended to date other people. After years of avoiding people and police snooping around, Brian became super paranoid that Denise would turn him in. Apparently, Denise felt the same, and the two would often pat each other down for wires when talking in their own home.
I mean, they didn't even trust each other.
No, and how could you?
They're both nuts.
Brian's self-confessed breaking point was the day he kidnapped Denise, believing she was going to turn him in for sure once the divorce was finalized. While Brian was in prison, awaiting his sentence, he sought out a hitman to kill Denise.
Oh, I'm honestly not surprised.
These people are so dumb.
He found one. Some guy came up to him, and this guy was Wade Wilson. So,
sorry, we're kind of all like in shock right now.
Are you processing?
Yeah, who's Wade Wilson again?
The quote-unquote hot death row guy with the swastikas.
We just talked about him with the tattoos all over his face.
The TikTok girls are like all fanning over.
No, that one?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Because I was gonna make a joke and be like, "Oh, did he get a hitman on 1-800-HITMAN.com?" You guys remember when we had that case a long time ago?
Yeah.
That was like a fake website, but it was stupid. But Wade Wilson, that's a really good tie-in, Kylie.
That is the celebrity guest appearance for today.
The heck?
Wow.
This is going so many places.
Obviously, that didn't pan out. Wade Wilson was not a hitman. Also, he is now on death row, and he will never be getting out, which is a good thing.
So he just happened to, like, how was he connected?
They were in the same prison, him and Brian.
Oh, okay. Worlds collide.
But back to the trial, Denise didn't testify, but her attorney's argument was basically the fact that there was zero evidence that Denise was involved beside Brian's testimony. The prosecutor rebutted this with the fact that Denise tried to cash the life insurance policy only 19 days after Mike went missing. This didn't work because Mike was not declared legally dead. Conveniently, Mike's jacket with his hunting license was found in the water, allowing her to petition the court and get the money. So the prevailing theory is that Denise or Brian put those things in the water later in order to get the money.
Definitely.
Denise's trial lasted for 4 days, and after 8 hours of deliberations, the jury returned with a guilty conviction on all charges. In February of 2019, Denise was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In July of the same year, all of the life insurance money was signed over to Denise's daughter to avoid further prosecution for insurance fraud, which was sure to come up next. The daughter is legally barred from using any of the money on her mother's legal fees and could face a pretty big fine if she does.
I've never really thought about that. I mean, I know that when you kill someone or your spouse or whatever, you can't, or a family member that has money going to you when you die, you can't get that money. I know that that's a law that was, I guess, passed because it happens quite frequently, obviously, but I've never thought about excluding people from using it on the defense of the supposed killer.
But like, I wonder if she would have anyways. You know, like in that case, killed your father, but it's your mom.
I mean, a lot of kids and family members stick beside person that it's very obvious a killer, you know?
We'll get to that later.
Ooh, Kylie.
So the daughter's name is out there. She is an adult now, but she was only 18 months old when her father was murdered, so I just chose not to include her name.
Oh, she was a baby. Oh, that's sad.
So after sentencing, Denise was imprisoned at the Florida Women's Reception Center, which I think is a funny name for a prison.
Yeah, it sounds like a place you would go to a party.
I'm gonna go play pickleball.
Yeah.
I just figured because it's like, oh, most receptionists are women, so we're going to put the women in the reception center.
How sexist.
It's a sexist thing.
Yeah.
One last twist. In January of 2020, Denise appealed her life sentence, arguing that there was no evidence that she was involved in the commission of the murder. At the appeal hearing, her daughter asked for leniency, putting all of the blame on Brian. But, like, she was 18 months old at the time? Anyways. In November of 2020, Denise's murder conviction was overturned.
Shut up. Wait a minute.
Wow.
Didn't she get life without the possibility of parole anyways?
Yes, so
How did she get to appeal it? I guess like I know you can appeal, but like it can get denied, and usually it is denied.
her appeal went through. So
And then it was overturned?
Wow.
overturned. Her other charges remained upheld. So for the conspiracy and accessory after the fact, those remained. So she was re-sentenced to only serve 30 years in prison for those charges, which is the maximum. In April of 2021, the Florida Attorney General appealed the conviction reversal, but the state Supreme Court declined to hear the appeal.
Wow.
That's pretty big.
So after all of that, years of investigating, now knowing what went down, neither Denise nor Brian have technically been convicted in the murder of Mike Williams. They're still in prison, but on other charges. The latest Brian could be released is 2037, and for Denise, 2051, but both still have the option of parole, which I don't think is enough.
No.
That's actually really sad that we know who did it. They even confessed when one of them did. And yet nobody's getting charged for it.
Yeah. His parents, I mean, I know you said his mom pushed really hard for the investigation. I'm sure and that's just really sad. It almost feels like no justice.
Like, Denise will be in her early 80s when she gets out, which is, I mean, I guess pretty old. But Brian will only be in his late 60s. Like, they will still have life to live.
Yeah, definitely. That sucks.
So, although justice doesn't really seem to have been served on paper, Mike's family believes he can rest in peace now that everyone knows what actually happened, and everyone knows who did it. After the resentencing, Mike's mom, Cheryl, gave an interview about the whole thing and opened up that she had been estranged from Mike and Denise's daughter, who still stands by Denise. Cheryl said all of the work that she did to solve Mike's disappearance wasn't just for him, but also for his only child. So, like I said earlier, Mike's daughter ended up being awarded all of his assets, including the family home and remaining life insurance money. Cheryl said the total value was around $1.4 million, but that her granddaughter deserved to have it all. Mike would have wanted his child to be taken care of. Okay, let's talk about the daughter. She still profusely believes that her mom is innocent and not involved at all.
I guess maybe does she state that she thinks it was her mom's ex-husband?
Yeah, she thinks it was all Brian.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't blame her. I don't agree, obviously, but I don't blame her. You've already lost one parent, and it's almost like she's fighting to have another one, and that's sad. But I do think that it's hard when family members continue to support somebody that's obviously guilty. But
I mean, she didn't really know her dad because she was only 18 months old at the time.
But she's getting all of his assets.
Yeah, but then it's like, okay, you grew up with basically just your mom and then your stepdad your whole life. Like, it's hard to view your parent in that way.
Yeah.
I will say, just thinking about it too, because Holly, you said this earlier, a lot of kids end up standing with the parent that's being jailed. And like vividly, I remember the case that was from North Carolina where the guy pushed his wife down the staircase.
Oh, that's exactly what I was thinking of. I was going to say
all of the kids except for the moms. Now, I will say the mom had her two daughters are like, no, he murdered her.
Yeah.
But all of his kids, his 4 or 5 kids, are all to this day still believe that he was innocent.
Him and her. Yeah. And her kids support her. Yeah, that's a good show. The Staircase. That's a good show. Also, can we talk about for a second just the whole stigma around people blaming, like, oh, I killed him because it's frowned upon to get a divorce. Like, is it not more frowned upon to murder somebody? Like, what sick and twisted?
Also says the woman who was like openly cheating on her husband.
Like, yeah,
like that's just weird. Oh, now you have standards. Oh, but you're gonna kill him, so not really.
I just hate when people use that excuse. It's like, what sick and twisted ideas do you have in your head that ending someone's life would be better than getting a divorce?
I feel like people use that excuse for cheating too. Like they always say they're like, my family doesn't believe in divorce. Oh, and then you just have multiple partners then.
Oh, but your family believes in killing people? Okay.
Yeah, that's nuts.
I think that's just something they tell themselves to make them like justify their actions.
Yeah, definitely.
The investigation into the disappearance and later murder of Mike Williams was nothing short of exhaustive. His mother, Cheryl, fought every single day to find out what happened to him and to bring the people responsible to justice. But it turns out that may not have been enough. And with that, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Over My Dead Pod. If you want even more information, including photos from the case, you can check out our blog on overmydeadpod.com. Be sure to leave us a review wherever you're listening to this and check us out on social media at Over My Dead Pod. And we'll see you next week with another case. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Should we hop into overtime?
Yes, please.
So speaking of Wade Wilson, I know last time we talked about just the hype and TikTok thirst traps about him.
Oh,
and so that made me go watch the Menendez brothers because, as Kylie pointed out in our last overtime, there's also a lot of thirstiness going around on the actors which is just funny to me. But I kind of get it now. I think that there's a lot of people that think that the actual brothers are attractive too.
Which I don't see.
I don't either. I don't really either, but
they're just not your type then.
Yeah. Well, he was a model. Eric was a model, so obviously he is attractive. But attractive people do terrible things, but
some attractive people do terrible things.
And I'm not saying that they did terrible. Did you guys watch what's her Brianna Chicken Fries podcast where she talked about that?
Oh yeah, she's getting like canceled over it. So now Now I'm trying to like watch
I
what I
know.
For
say.
what?
I was trying to choose my words very carefully. She made some kind of remark about them by saying that they shouldn't have killed their parents and but she said it in kind of a way that was a little bit demeaning to their abuse, but now she's getting attacked. So I was choosing my words very carefully when I was trying
What
to
did she
say
say?
that.
I think she said something like if they're being abused, like they should have just run away, something like
hmm
that.
My thing about that is like you can say that sometimes, like, oh, well, if you didn't want to be there, whatever. But it's not that they could have run away. I mean, it started when they were children, they grew up in it. They were indoctrinated by thinking that it was normal. I don't think there was really any escape for them after you've been raised like that. I mean, they couldn't escape when they were little kids. So,
No, no, they couldn't have done that. And I think it was just like, I mean, was Eric 18 or 19? Like they were both legally adults, but then like,
yeah.
oh yeah, just brainwashed. I think they just like reached a boiling point.
Yeah. And I mean, we're not psychologists. So, I mean, I'm sure that growing up in an environment like that would mess with your brain even as you reach adulthood too. So something definitely wasn't right. Uh,
No, but
but anyways, the thirst traps are still there. So
do you get it
um
now?
I do get it. I mean, I think that the actors are attractive. I don't know who they are, but and I think they play them very well. Just even the mannerisms that they have remind me of the interviews I've seen with the real Menendez brothers. So
Well, that whole
good
show did
job.
a really, I still haven't watched it, but from the clips I've seen, did a really good job on doing the exact positioning, movements, and everything from the court cases as well.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, and
crazy.
just the way they talk a little different and they say, I don't know, just there was one like interview where they were talking and he would talk about something like really, really super serious. I think it was Eric. And then he would switch to just like talking about something completely normal. And I think the actors like captured that really well because they didn't think that their abuse was that abnormal because they grew up in it, you know? So they would describe like these terrible, horrific situations that they were in, and then they would just be like, "Oh, so yeah, so what are you doing for lunch?" You know, like it was just,
You guys know who Robert Shapiro is?
hmm
Yeah.
So I guess he was their original attorney. And in the show, I don't know if it actually happened in real life. Lyle asked him to bring a bunch of different things to prison for him, including like self tanner and
Yeah.
cola.
Oh,
Yes, I that part was
that's
really
funny.
funny. Yeah.
Ugh,
He's like, "I'm here to talk about your defense, not your tanning oil." He's
that
like,
would
"The
be me.
lights." He's like, "The lights are sucking the pigment from my skin."
Which I understand. I understand.
I get it.
All right, Kate, you gotta watch it so we can keep
Yeah,
talking about this for weeks to come.
Am I gonna
mm.
have time? Okay, I'll try.
I'm not even done with it, so you got
No.
time. It's
No,
really
okay.
good though. So last weekend, I went to my mom's wedding in Frisco, Colorado. It was very
Woohoo!
beautiful, super
Love
fun.
Frisco.
It was so great. She had a amazing party afterwards. It was at like a brewery. They rented out, had a DJ, and I mean, they just threw down like they were in college, and all my adult relatives were throwing down like a frat party, and it was fun and awesome and just great. It was great. It was wonderful. So that's my
Cute.
update. Very cute. Very cute.
Were you hungover the next day or were you tame?
I wasn't that bad, I don't think. It was a very early wedding. I think her ceremony was at 2, and then we had dinner at like 5. So I wasn't up that late. So I had a good recovery time.
How many people were there?
I'd probably say about 40,
Oh,
30,
okay.
30
That
to
definitely
40.
was bigger than I thought. I thought it was just like almost elopement style.
Yeah, so my mom's fiance, I guess her husband now, his family is from Colorado. So it was very small with my family. There was not much of my family there, but his family that lived close, they came to the ceremony and stayed. Some of them stayed for the reception, some of them didn't. I would say there was probably like maybe 20 people at the reception. So
It's a good size for a party.
it looked cute. It was
Yeah, I
good.
can't wait to see pictures.
Her photographer did amazing. First of all, the day after she had her pictures ready, unedited, but she could view them.
Hey,
And actually, they didn't even need an edit. They were amazing. And her gift to my mom was this box, like this big, of Polaroids of like candid photos she had taken throughout the wedding. So she
Oh, I
literally got
love that.
pictures at the reception.
that's
Wow.
cute.
So that's
Yeah.
from her photographer?
Yeah,
Send me their name. That sounds amazing.
I think I'm gonna hire her for mine.
Yeah. Do they travel?
Strictly destination. So if I do a destination wedding, I'm gonna hire her.
Well,
That
there
was
you
a
go.
great job, Like what a good job to have.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm strictly destination. Fly me
Yeah, they
out.
make
Like,
bank.
yeah, that's awesome.
Just go to vacations.
Yeah, it's like you're on vacation. She came to the reception, had the dinner, did all the things. Like, that's awesome. I'd love to do that. All right, well, I'm gonna go figure out how to be a destination photographer.
Good luck with that.
I'm gonna go feed my
Bye.
child.
Kate, that's not funny.
Oh, uh, I have nothing else going on in my life. I'm sorry.
It's good.
I'm gonna feed my child. Yeah. All right. Sorry, guys. Good story today,
Bye.
Kylie. Love ya.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.